Hi folks, Slick Slices here. Now today I've got really quite a special little knife here. As many of you will appreciate, there are probably two great designers, two great Russian designers that are very sort of sought after these days. One is Shirogorov, who just make just superbly engineered and finished and so forth knives, and the other Dmitry Sinkevich. Now Dmitry Sinkevich, I'm a bit unsure of some of his designs. He uses a lot of very heavy acid stone washes, and he also makes knives that are often very thin, which just don't really catch my eye. One of the other things though that he is quite well known for is this kind of topographic sort of pattern. It's almost like the contour lines on a map, but they're actually, this is higher than this, and they in turn are higher than this, and in turn higher than this final piece and the little piece here. So all in all, that's quite a nice aesthetic that he uses. It gives a bit of grip to the knife, gives a bit of interest to the knife, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to make. And often you'll find with many knives of this sort of type, you get all that on the front, and then on the back it's completely plain. And this knife is carried the same theme through. So this is a collab between Sinkevich design and Shirogorov, and you can look at this knife till you are blue in the face, and there's nothing to tell you that on the outside. All the information, which we'll come to in a minute, is on the inside of the scales. So if you're in any doubt, you can look inside there. You don't need to take the knife to pieces. You can actually read it from the outside. Now, this is also a very limited edition knife. There are only 300 of these made, which I suppose in a British or Sheffield sense, that would be a large number, but for a larger manufacturer like Shirogorov, it is a very small number. Now, the other things that kind of throws you off, you're looking for the Shirogorov bear on the handle here. It's usually sort of here or somewhere around here. There isn't any. The other thing you generally find with Shirogorov is they use a proprietary pivot, which on the show side has a groove in it, which you could use a flat bladed screwdriver or perhaps a plastic spudger or something to turn. You don't need their tool particularly, but this just has a blue anodized pivot, which is slightly dished on the top, and then it has a brighter polished blue rim around it. This is blue as well though. At the other end, you generally with a Shiro would have one sort of screw, but there are no screws at this end. And if we turn it over, other than the over travel stop, there are no screws there other than the pivot either. So you have to kind of wonder how they do that, and the answer is that they have put two screws in the end here. Now, this means that the clip acts as the backspacer, the standoff between the two parts. It also forms a lanyard ring, but it's also reversible. Now, I don't know whether you'd want to reverse this, but you could do, and the clip would sit there, therefore on this side, and this would become the show side for a left-hander. Now, I don't know that that works perfectly. but it's a lot more satisfactory than many reversible clips. This side, despite it being fully ambidextrous and reversible, looks absolutely fine. You don't have any holes here, you don't have a filler tab or anything like that. You simply have the end of the clip showing through, which is, just really nice. Now, it does have a proprietary pivot screw, which is a little bit annoying, but hey, can't have everything. Again, it's dished on this side, and again it has the brighter shiny blue anodization around the outside of the pivot. The rest of it's just grey, by the way. And then of course you have the two screws in the end, which are also titanium, and they're also anodized blue. Obviously the handle is fully titanium, and I think it's a good little knife. We'll look at the size in a minute and compare it to a couple of others. But one of the things you'll notice is it has a tiny flipper tab. But one of the things I've always liked about Shirogorov is the action, and they're the only knives that I can absolutely be sure I'm going to be able to flip without any sort of doubt as to whether it's going to open or not. So long as you can overcome the detent, a Shirogorov knife will always open, and open with authority, as this one does. Now that's despite that tiny flipper, despite the fact that I have the world's worst hands for doing this sort of thing. I have no fine motor skills at all in my hand, and yet this will open and open consistently and very well, and it reveals another of the key things. Well, one of the things I really like when I'm looking at a knife is the blade. You can get a lot of knives that have got a very simple, plain blade, which can be elegant, but I like one where there's some interest in it. I can put up with the plainest of handles if the blade is right. Like the Koenig Arius has a wonderful blade, and the milling on it and machining on it is fantastic. Though, the handle is relatively uninspiring, grey titanium. This at least has a pattern to it. Like it or loathe it, it's there. And we also have I mentioned the clip earlier, in that it works as a standoff. It's also got a lanyard hole in it. It's also reversible, but it's milled titanium, and the section here which gives it its bend is quite thin, so it works really very well. Now, and we'll talk about this blade, because this blade is the star of the show without a doubt, in many ways. I believe they call it a modified sheep's foot. I struggle with modified anything. You suddenly seem to lose all perspective, and this really isn't a sheep's foot, but I suppose with it having the sort of squared off non-sharpened end here, it sort of is sheep footy. It's possibly even lamb's footy, because it starts off broad and it gets narrower towards the tip. But hey, call it what you like. It is made of S110V steel, which is very hard and holds an edge very, very well. I've also found it to be a bit chippy. But to be honest, in a knife like this, that's not likely to be a real problem, because you're not going to be doing any chopping. You're not likely to be trying to cut through staples or anything, thing. But there is a danger. Like one of my Rocksteads has got 2 chips in the blade. They're tiny and would be inconsequential in a normal knife, because you'd sharpen them out in one sharpen. But you can get little chips. Now this one, of course, is absolutely perfect, but then it's probably never really cut anything. But now, one of the things I always like about a blade isn't just the steel that it's made of, but the amount of thought and work that's gone into the shape of the knife. Now, it's got jimping on the back, which I just never see the point of, but people like it, so it's there. In terms of the geometry, we have this sort of swedge here that comes almost down to a sort of false edge, and then we have a bit of flat here which is polished, and then we have this sort of stonewashed finish on this flat, which comes down from this line here down to the final bevel at the bottom, and it's completely flat. We've got a nice plunge line which comes back far enough that I think you could sharpen this without too much danger of catching the plunge line, even though it doesn't really have a large sharpening choil. It probably doesn't really need it. I think even with a fixed angle sharpener, you're going to be able to get in there without too much trouble. Anyway, now note the shape of this blade. It's flat from the polished flat. It's a flat grind right the way down to the tip on that side. But when we turn it over, it's different. That's because, again, we've got the polished flat, we've got the swedge, they're exactly the same. And then the blade starts off very similar to the other side with this flat grind portion, but it has this, if it was a Japanese knife, you'd call it a shinogi line here, where the bevel changes again, and then it comes down from there right to the edge. And as far as I can see, there is no micro bevel on this side. That there is the final bevel. The only micro bevel is on this side. So it's in a way it's almost like a chisel ground knife, except that on a chisel ground blade the back would be flat, and here it's actually coming down to a narrow edge. Overall, the blade is symmetrical if you look at it like that. It's just the way that instead of having a flat that comes down to a micro bevel, which is beautifully shiny by the way and very sharp, on this side the flat just comes down to a zero edge, which is they're not making life easy for themselves when they make this knife. It's a labour of love, and it's almost like Sinkevich designed this thing and then handed it on to Shirogorov and said, go on, build it, I dare you. And they have dared to build it, and as a result their 300 pieces were released. If you want to buy one, obviously they were sold out immediately, but on the secondary market you can occasionally find them on places like Arizona Custom Knives, but expect to pay north of $2,000 if you want one of these. Is it? I mean, you can never really say if it's worth it or not. Will this do anything more than a £200 or $200 knife? And the answer is probably not. But it is very beautiful, and there's a lot of thoughts gone into it. We have my bugbear here of the relief cupping on the outside, which I've never really liked. But having said that, we've got a nice, slightly more complicated cut to the lock bar. We have an over travel and steel, friction bearing against the blade, but it's screwed from the inside, so this is the tail of the screw rather than the head of the screw, I think. Anyway, I'm not 100% sure. I can't take that. I'm not going to take the knife to bits just to find out, but it does mean that this is nice and small and it's flush. You can feel it because it's on the cusp of this contour line, but other than that, you almost wouldn't feel it. It's certainly very flat. Now, the other thing about this handle is that it is very, very heavily machined inside. Now, I don't know how much you'll be able to see of that, if any, but it's machined to death inside. There's a sort of lattice structure that's been left, but the consequence of that is that this is a knife with a 3.5-inch blade. It's about 8 inches overall, and it's solid. It's a titanium knife, and it weighs 3.4 ounces, which, if you are, going by the Nick Shabazz an ounce an inch allowance, it's less than an ounce per inch, which makes it a really, would make it a really good knife to carry, because although it's a solid titanium knife, it's not a heavy knife. It's not inconsequential in your hand. It doesn't, it's not like an open L where you wonder if you've bought, is there anything actually there? This has enough weight in it to feel that you've got a knife that knows what it's doing, but it's not so heavy as to overburden you. Now, just by way of size, when I first looked at it, I and held it in my hand, I thought of it as being comparable with the small Sebenza, but it kind of belies its size, because although the handle is just a little bit more than the Sebenza, the blade is quite a lot longer, so it has quite a good efficiency in terms of the amount of blade to the amount of handle, but it is substantially bigger than the small Sebenza. A better comparator for it is the large Sebenza, where it is almost the same size. It's very slightly shorter in the handle and very, very slightly shorter in the blade, but it's not so much as you'd almost notice. And I just put this way. If you start the cutting edge at the same place here, the Shirogorov, the Kami. Did I tell you it's called the Kami? I may not have mentioned that at the beginning. I have a feeling I didn't. Is very slightly longer than the large Sebenza, despite the fact its handle is considerably shorter. So again, I think that's quite a neat bit of knife design. The Sebenza has a very simple hollow ground knife with plenty of bevel on it, so it's a good all-round utility knife. But this isn't bad in terms of just general utility and the ability to use it as a knife. The angle of the handle to the blade means you can get quite quite a lot of blade right down onto a working surface, and still have room for your knuckles. It's not quite a a kitchen utility knife shape, but it's a pretty good compromise. Would it be good as a tactical blade? Possibly, but I think you probably want to go for something with more of a point. I think this is the point that this is making is that it's more of a a pocket tool rather than a sort of tactical device, and I quite like that. I don't like the idea. If I wanted to carry a tactical knife, I'd be carrying my Fairbairn Sykes or something. I have no wish to carry a knife, a tactical knife. So I like my knife to look like it's not tactical, and I think this kind of carries that off by having this squared off tip to it. I mentioned earlier that the action of this knife is superb, and that even when you fluff the flip like that, it still opens. That is because it has a Shirogorov multi-row bearing system, which effectively means 3 concentric rows of non-captive ball bearings, which gives it the smoothest of action. I get told off by people saying, I tell them it's got the smoothest action and then never show them. Well, I'll try this here. Yeah, it just drops shut without any hesitation and flips open with ease, despite the tiniest of flipper tabs. But that action is just lovely. I wish I had the dexterity to show it as clearly as as other people can. But let's see if I can. Yeah, just drops shut. Bearing in mind it's really sharp. I think you probably have to be careful of that actually. But anyway, I think it's a really lovely little knife with a really beautiful action. Yeah, I'm kind of taken with this. Now, is it worth $2,000 plus? One of them was $2,500, I noticed. Yeah, I can't say that. But you certainly get a lot for your money, a lot more than you might get with some knives. I think you're getting the work of 2 of the best knife designers stroke producers in the world, but at the same time it's not gaudy, it doesn't shout out anything. If you want to see any the sort of writing on this knife, you probably can't see it in there, but it's inside the scale there. It says Sinkevich design, and it's got the Shirogorov bear on the other side, and then on the you can't see it unless the knife is only half shut, but just on the inside of the front scale there, it tells you the number out of 300. This one is 200 and I think it's 239. It's very small, difficult to read. I don't have the birthday card with it, so I can't. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, let's say there were only 300. Anyway, I think that's probably as much as I want to or need to say about this knife. It's a lovely little piece, and yeah, it's one I would love to own if I could. but it will be being returned very, very shortly. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, please subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. It's useful for the channel. And if you'd like to leave a comment, please do. I always read all the comments. I'm terrible at replying to them. Just because I'm usually lying in bed when I'm watching, reading all the comments, and it's very difficult to type from there. Anyway, thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.